Hello again, everyone. Welcome to another episode of 30 Years Ago, this month. We're 4 months into the year, and if you're good at mathing, that means we are now in April, and we'll be talking about April 1993, 30 years ago. I'm assuming everybody knows what this show is. It's pretty self-explanatory. Let's move on. As seems to be the norm so far this year, that was a really weird sentence. Anyway, so far this year, there hasn't been much to talk about in the world of music news, so we're just going to skip that part and go straight to the good stuff. The music charts! That's right, everybody. What were the number one albums in April of 1993? Well, for the first week, nothing fucking new here. The number one album in America was the Bodyguard soundtrack. Now, come on. At this point, doesn't everybody already have a copy? What's going on here? But hey, something new. For the second week of April 1993, the number one album in America was Songs of Faith and Devotion by Depeche Mode. The whatever number Depeche Mode album. And I remember a couple songs off that. Was I Feel You off that one? That's a pretty good one. But apparently it wasn't that good. Because for the rest of the month of April 1993, the number one album in America was the Bodyguard soundtrack. For fuck's sake. At this point, I'm pretty sure record executives were just buying copies for their family as presents and shit, just to keep the shit rolling. But when it comes to the charts, that's not all we talk about. Whew. Is it getting hot in here?
The Hot 10.
That's right, the Hot 10. The hottest top 10 songs according to the Hot 100 charts on Billboard for the month of April 1993. The way we've been doing this is I've been looking at the charts for the first week of April. So when we roll into April, these are the 10 most popular songs in America. Number 10, Bon Jovi with Bed of Roses. Once again, I don't remember this song, didn't bother to look it up. I feel fine with it. At number 9, a new entry, Ugly Kid Joe with And the Cat's in the Cradle and the Silver Spoon, Little Boy Blue and the Man on the Moon. Always good to have some rock in the charts, even if it is a cover of a very not rockin' song. At number 8, it's Arrested Development with Mr. Wendell. At number 7, it's Duran Duran with Ordinary World. I sang more of that in a previous episode, so go check that out. At number 6, we have Whitney Houston with I'm Making Money. Every Woman. At number 5 is Jade with Don't Walk Away, Boy. Ugh, that was awful. At number 4, Whitney Houston hogging up the damn charts again with I Have Nothing. And I Got Nothing. At number 3, we have Dr. Dre. Dr. Dre. At number 3, we have Dr. Dre moving up the charts with Nothing But a G Thing, Baby. At number 2, we have a song that just rocketed up the charts. It's Silk with 'Cause Tonight, Baby, I Wanna Get Freaky With You. Freak Me is the name of the song. Remember that? Like late 80s, early 90s where people were replacing fuck with freak? Like that was the new term. Anybody say that anymore? Nobody says that. At number 1, we're proud of this guy. He's our boy here on the show. I call him Mr. Snow because I know he deserves my respect. But there he is at number 1, Snow with Informer. You don't say that's wrong with Taco Bell. That's not the lyrics. Although, why didn't he do that? He could have had a fucking Taco Bell commercial. Jeez. I have all the ideas 30 years later. All right, that was the music charts. Let's move over to the movie charts. For the first week of April 1993, I had to look this up on several sources because I'm like, there's no fucking way. But apparently it's true. The number one movie in America was Cop and a Half, the kid buddy cop movie with Burt Reynolds. Oh, how the bandit hath fallen. I mean, I know nothing about this movie. I never saw it. I don't know anybody that saw it. So you tell me. And for the rest of the month of April 1993, the number one movie in America was another movie that I didn't see because, funny enough, 15-year-old me was not interested at all. Indecent Proposal with Woody Harrelson and Demi Moore. Is it Robert Redford? It's around that time that, like, all these movies were coming out. It's like, hey, if you're an adult, you want to go see a movie about sex because you're an adult. And the people that, like, really wanted movies about sex, the 15-year-old boys, would see movies like this and go,
what the fuck is sexy about this?
Now, I'm sure I gathered the knowledge that I have about that movie through catching scenes here and there when it would air on HBO or whatever. But, the moral of the story is don't pay somebody to have sex with your wife because it causes problems. All right, and now for the feature that everybody's waiting for, the main attraction. Album releases. Thank you, announcer. So this is when we talk about the albums that came out in April of 1993. The first one I'm going to talk about, one of my favorite albums from one of my favorite bands of all time. Now, on their Bandcamp page, it says this album came out on April 1st. And that is honestly one of the only places that there's actually a date for this particular album because it wasn't a huge release. But I did some math, and I know that back then albums came out on Tuesdays, so I'm going to say this album came out on April 6th of 1993. Creep Diets, the second album from Fudge Tunnel, noise, rock, metal, grungy, awesome fucking shit that I love, came out in April of 1993, and I heard it soon after. Not much going on in the back here. It's one of those hidden things. You stare at it for a long time, and there's an image inside of it. Can you see it? Pause it and look at it. I'm just kidding. How long did you pause it for? This album was super important to me when it came out. I've talked about this album a lot. I'll talk about this band a lot forevermore because this was the kind of shit that I wanted to hear in 1993. I was way into metal, thrash metal, death metal, grunge, alternative, all those things, but I needed something that was kind of somewhere in the middle of all that. But I wanted it to be music that spoke directly to me, and honestly, this is one of the biggest albums when it comes to that kind of thing. So happy 30th birthday to Creep Diets, and hopefully you'll hear me mentioning this album again very soon. Also released on April 6th. Did I say April last time? Why does my brain make me think I said February? Did I say that? I'm done with that month. On April 6th, confirmed, this album was released. Undertow by Tool, the album that introduced most of us to Tool through the song Sober. Still a fucking banger today. Saw them on this tour, one of the first big concerts I ever went to. Absolutely adore this album. Little by little, I became less and less interested in this band, but this album to me still holds up, still amazing, heavy, odd, unique, and moving. Undertow. On April 13th, an album that pretty much nobody knows about, especially people that watch my channel, but it came out and I love it. The only album from Capital Tax, the Swole Package. This is 90 hip-hop goodness at its best. The album did not do well at all. There was a couple singles, and I think there's probably a handful of people that know this album, but it doesn't get mentioned very often. And I think it's probably because while it is a very strong album, in my opinion, it's not very much different to a lot of other albums that are similar that came out in the years surrounding it. So I think it just kind of got buried underneath other more popular hip-hop albums because I think it's fucking great. So if you can find it, I think it's on your Apple Musics and your Spotify's and shit. So if you're into that 90s hip-hop sound, Swole Package from Capital Tax. On April 20th, probably the biggest selling album we're going to be talking about in this episode, the 11th studio album from Aerosmith, Get a Grip. This was one of those things where, like, after Permanent Vacation and then Pump, they had gotten so huge, you're like, how much huger could they get? Apparently this much huger. I mean, how many singles did this thing have? Eat the Rich, Living on the Edge, Crying, Crazy, Amazing, all hit songs, all great songs. This is a killer album. Part of that second half Aerosmith sound, if you feel that way. I like all Aerosmith, but yeah, they definitely went in a more sort of pop rock kind of way, I guess. There's still the bluesiness in there, but I don't know, it's more polished and it's just really fucking well done. Aerosmith, Get a Grip. Also on April 20th, the third album from Primus, Pork Soda, was released. This was one of the albums I remember getting the weekend it came out because I was a big Primus fan, and it was one that had to take a little time to grow on me. In fact, a lot of Primus albums post Sailing the Seas had to grow on me, but they eventually did because Primus hasn't put out anything but fucking quality shit. But Pork Soda had My Name is Mud, which I'm pretty sure is their biggest song ever. And it's more experimental than their previous albums, and I appreciate that at an older age. Didn't so much at the time, but Pork Soda is definitely an album that I feel has held up very well. So there you go. Finally, on April 27th, it's funny how all the albums I've talked about, they have a 90s feel to them. Like you think about that album and you go, yep, that was the 90s. But also this album came out, Exposed by Vince Neil, the first Vince Neil solo album after he quit Motley Crue. And this is actually a really good album. Like going back and listening to it again, I remember doing the Motley Crue album ranking on Cranked and Ranked like 3 years ago. And just for shits and giggles, I listened to Exposed after listening to the self-titled Motley Crue album, and I couldn't tell you which one I liked better. They're two different vibes, both very well done in my opinion. But the Vince Neil one I think was actually more successful because there were a couple of successful songs from it. You're Invited But Your Friend Can't Come from the classic movie Encino Man. And there was the Can't Have Your Cake, and then Sister Something. There were songs that had some rotation, and I think this album did pretty well. Which is probably why, after the self-titled Motley Crue album fell apart, they were just like, we need to get that Vince guy back. Flash forward to 30 years later, and oh, how the years have been kind to some and unkind to others, but we're all humans, and we're all here on this big spinning rock together. That's it for this episode of 30 Years Ago this month. Thank you very much for being here. Thank you all for watching my shit. I'm going to be back with more shit soon, but when it comes to this show, I will see you all again next month.